doesn't matter what it is that we do. The main thing that we have to do, that I do, is I just try to hold space for the part of myself that feels less than, and give it love and give it grace. And that be what he does in the movie is unforgivable. And there's no excuse, and no amount of I'm sorry's will ever undo it or fix it. He blew up his life, and he deserved to lose his family.
Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds have just sent a message so disturbing that everyone in their orbit should be terrified. And it's not hiding in some cryptic interview or anonymous source. It's sitting right there in plain sight inside a legal filing they tried desperately to keep hidden from the world. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. What I'm about to walk you through is one of the most alarming legal maneuvers I have ever seen from celebrities. And I need you to understand the full scope of what happened, because this isn't just about Hollywood drama. This is about power, control, and what happens when two of the most famous people on the planet decide to weaponize the legal system against private citizens who never asked for any of this. Let me start at the beginning, because the context matters. We're living in a time when the old rules don't apply anymore. There was a time when celebrities could control their image completely. They had publicists, glossy magazine covers, carefully curated interviews, and they could hide absolutely everything they didn't want you to see. But social media changed that. Regular people now have platforms. Creators, podcasters, journalists working outside the traditional system can expose things that would have stayed buried forever. And for someone like Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, who have spent years building this perfect, untouchable image, that loss of control is apparently unbearable. So, what do they do when they feel threatened? They don't just fight back. They try to destroy. And in this case, they tried to use the court system to do it. Here's what happened. There was a private individual, not a public figure, not someone in the entertainment industry, just a regular person who worked at a publicist company called Jones Works. This person had no involvement in any of the drama between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, had nothing to do with the movie, had nothing to do with any of the lawsuits. But Blake and Ryan wanted something that this person had: information, communications, and they were willing to go to extreme lengths to get it. So they set up something called Vanson. Now you need to understand what Vanson is, because this is where it gets really insidious. Vanson is a company that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds created to handle payroll and administrative matters for their personal employees, their assistants, their security, their household staff, the people who work for them privately. It's a shell company. It exists to manage their personal lives. It has absolutely nothing to do with film production, with public relations, with any of the businesses involved in the Justin Baldoni situation. But they used this company to file a lawsuit, not in their own names. They didn't put their names on it. They filed it under Vanson. And then they used that lawsuit to issue a subpoena demanding the complete digital life of that private individual I mentioned. Now let me read you exactly what they asked for, because I need you to understand the scope of this. They demanded access to Gmail accounts, Outlook accounts, Signal messages, WhatsApp conversations, Telegram chats, Instagram direct messages, TikTok direct messages, Facebook messages. They wanted access to notes, files, photos, videos, sound recordings. They demanded browser history. They demanded location data showing everywhere this person had been. They wanted everything. And they didn't just want the communications involving Blake or Ryan or the movie. They wanted all communications. Every conversation this person had with anyone. Their mom, their dad, their sister, their doctor, their lawyer, their friends. Every single person who appeared in any of those communications would then have their names, addresses, and phone numbers handed over to Blake and Ryan's legal team. Think about what that means. If your friend works at a company and someone decides they want information, they can subpoena your friend's entire digital existence and then get your personal information just because you sent a text message to the wrong person. That is the world Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds were trying to create for one private individual who had done nothing to them. Now here's where this gets even more disturbing. The lawyer for Vanson testified about exactly what happened. And the testimony reveals a pattern of behavior that should concern absolutely everyone. According to the testimony, Blake Lively personally authorized everything. She authorized the filing of the lawsuit. She authorized the service of the subpoena. She received and reviewed all the materials that were produced. She was hands-on with every step of this process. And then, once she got everything she wanted, she authorized the dismissal of the lawsuit. She closed it down, got what she came for, and walked away. Now, ask yourself this question. If you genuinely believed one of your employees was violating a non-disclosure agreement, if you genuinely thought someone was leaking information about you, why would you file a lawsuit under a shell company instead of in your own name? Why would you target someone who wasn't even your employee? Why would you demand every single communication from every single platform instead of just requesting information related to your NDAs? And why would you immediately dismiss the case once you got all that data? The answer is pretty clear. This wasn't about protecting legitimate legal rights. This was about getting information. This was about accessing someone's entire digital life to find anything that could be used against them or against Justin Baldoni or against anyone else connected to this situation. And there's a strong argument that this was even worse than that. There's reason to believe that Blake and Ryan may have already had access to some of this information before filing the subpoena, and that the subpoena was actually a way to launder that information, to make it look like it was obtained legally through court process so that they could then hand it to the New York Times and other outlets and claim it was all properly obtained through discovery. Think about the timing. The information they wanted, they got. The case got dismissed. And then suddenly, the New York Times runs a story based on what? Based on information that Blake and Ryan's team provided. Information that now had a paper trail suggesting it came from a legitimate subpoena. Whether that's true or not, the appearance alone is damning. But here's what really gets me about all of this. The message that this sends to everyone in their lives. And I mean everyone. If you are a friend of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, this should terrify you. If you are a business partner, this should terrify you. If you are a colleague, someone they worked with on a film, someone they hired for a project, someone they happen to have a disagreement with, someone they just don't like, this should absolutely terrify you. Because here's what they've now demonstrated publicly. They have the resources to file lawsuits that most people could never afford. They have access to one of the largest law firms in the United States, a firm with over 1,000 lawyers that typically represents corporations, not individuals making sexual harassment claims. They have the ability to create shell companies to file those lawsuits so their own names aren't attached. And they have demonstrated that they are willing to use all of that power to dig into every corner of someone's private life. They will get your Gmail. They will get your Outlook. They will get your Signal, your WhatsApp, your Telegram. They will get your Instagram DMs, your TikTok messages, your Facebook messages. They will get your notes, your files, your photos, your videos. They will get your browser history. They will get your location data showing everywhere you've been. They will get everything. And then they will hand-select the worst pieces of that information, the most damaging things they can find, and they will feed it to media outlets to destroy your reputation while telling a false story about you. And the people who enable this? The publicists who work for them, the journalists who write favorable pieces about them, the friends who stay silent, the colleagues who don't speak out, they should all be paying attention too. Because if you're willing to do this to someone who worked at a publicist company, someone who had no direct involvement in any of this, what would you do to someone who actually crossed you? What would you do to a journalist who wrote something you didn't like? What would you do to a former friend who knew too much? What would you do to anyone who threatens the perfectly curated image you've spent decades building? Let me be really clear about something. The subpoena I'm describing is one of the most invasive legal requests I have ever seen. And I've covered a lot of cases. I've seen a lot of lawsuits. I've watched celebrities do terrible things to protect their images. But this is different. This is a fundamental abuse of the legal system. When you file a lawsuit and issue a subpoena, there are supposed to be guardrails. There are supposed to be protections. The information requested is supposed to be relevant to the actual legal claims. It's supposed to be proportional to the needs of the case. And the attorney is supposed to review the materials, not just hand everything over to the client with no oversight. But in this case, according to everything we've seen, Blake Lively personally received and reviewed all of the materials. No protective orders. No guardrails. No limitations. Just full access to everything this private individual had ever communicated. And then once she had it, she dismissed the case. That's not how legitimate lawsuits work. That's not how legitimate discovery works. That's an abusive process. And frankly, it should concern everyone who cares about privacy rights, about legal ethics, about the basic idea that regular people shouldn't have their entire digital lives ransacked because a celebrity wants to find dirt on someone. And the scope of what they asked for is honestly mind-blowing. They didn't just ask for communications related to the film or related to Blake and Ryan or related to any specific issue. They asked for everything. And they demanded that any communications produced also include the names, addresses, and phone numbers of every single person mentioned in those communications. So if you send an email to this person about your vacation plans, your name and contact information is now in the hands of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' legal team. If you texted them about a medical appointment, your information is now part of this case. If your kids sent them a message, if your spouse had a conversation with them, if anyone you know communicated with this person in any way, their personal information has now been swept up in this fishing expedition. That is not how discovery is supposed to work. That's not how privacy is supposed to work. That's not how any of this is supposed to work. And the fact that it happened, the fact that it was authorized, the fact that a court apparently allowed this, should absolutely terrify anyone who values their privacy. Now, I want to talk about the people involved in enabling this. Because Blake and Ryan didn't do this alone. They had help. They had lawyers who filed these papers. They had publicists who probably knew what was happening. They had friends and colleagues who stayed silent. They had an entire infrastructure of people who either participated in this or looked the other way while it was happening. And here's the thing about that infrastructure. It's fragile. Because if you're willing to do this to someone who worked at a publicist company, you're willing to do this to anyone. The publicists who work for them now, the assistants, the business managers, the lawyers, the friends who still show up at their parties, the celebrities who pose for photos with them, they're all just one disagreement away from being on the other side of one of these subpoenas. That's the message that this sends. That's the warning that's now been publicly filed in court documents for everyone to see. We will do this to anyone who crosses us. We have the resources. We have the lawyers. We have the willingness. And we will destroy you if you get in our way. And for what? To protect an image? To protect a brand? To make sure that no one says anything negative about them? To ensure that the glossy magazine covers keep coming and the curated interviews keep running and the perfect image stays perfect? There's something else here that I think we need to talk about. And it's the broader context of how power works in Hollywood and in our society generally. We've spent years watching celebrities get away with things. We've watched them use their money and their influence to silence critics, to bury stories, to make problems disappear. And most of the time, we never even know what happened. The stories just don't get told. The victims just don't come forward. The evidence just never sees the light of day. But sometimes something slips through. Sometimes someone fights back. And in this case, Justin Baldoni and the Wayfair parties have decided that they're not going to just accept this. They're not going to let themselves be destroyed by a smear campaign. They're fighting back. And in doing so, they're exposing things that might otherwise have stayed hidden forever. The allegations about the subpoena, about Van Zandt, about the lengths Blake and Ryan were willing to go to, all of that is coming out because someone decided to stand up. Someone decided that even though they were facing two of the most powerful people in Hollywood, even though they were up against unlimited resources and unlimited legal firepower, even though the odds were stacked against them, they were going to fight anyway. And that matters. It matters because if no one ever fights back, if everyone just accepts that this is how things work, then nothing ever changes. The powerful keep getting more powerful. The abuses keep getting worse. And regular people keep getting crushed. But if people do fight back, if they do expose what's happening, if they do force these things into the light, then maybe, just maybe, there can be consequences. Maybe there can be accountability. Maybe the message changes from, we can do whatever we want to, if you do this, there will be repercussions. Now, I'm not naive. I know that Blake and Ryan have enormous advantages here. They have money. They have lawyers. They have publicists. They have friends in high places. They have the ability to shape the narrative in ways that most people don't. But they also have something working against them now. They have a paper trail. They have court documents. They have testimony. They have evidence of what they did and how they did it. And that evidence is now public. People can see it. people can talk about it. People can draw their own conclusions. And that's the thing about the world we live in now. The old model of complete control, the ability to hide everything behind glossy magazine covers and friendly interviews, that model doesn't work as well as it used to. Because once something gets out, once it's in the public domain, it's really hard to stuff it back in the box. So, what happens next? I don't know. I don't know if there will be legal consequences for what they did. I don't know if any court will find that this subpoena was an abusive process. I don't know if any of the people whose information was swept up in this fishing expedition will have any recourse. But I do know that we're watching something unfold in real time. We're watching two of the most famous people on the planet get exposed in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. And I know that the message they tried to send, the message that they can destroy anyone who crosses them, that message is now being met with a counter-message. A message that says we see what you did. We're not going to look away. We're not going to pretend this is normal. And we're going to talk about it until something changes. The message Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds sent is clear. Cross them, and they will dig through every corner of your life. They'll take your messages, your location data, your private conversations, and use it all to destroy you. Justin Baldoni and his team are fighting back. The question is whether anyone else will have the courage to do the same. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.